Cool.
So I'm Jack Vassell. I have been a nature lover all my life and have had the unique privilege of being a rewilding practitioner. When we purchased the land back in 2019 and decided to do something with it that would be positive for nature and positive for the environment, we did a lot of research, and my research sort of led to understanding this massive biodiversity loss that we've witnessed over the last 10, 20, 30 years that's happened across the UK, leading us to be bottom of the leaderboard in biodiversity around the world. So when we looked into what could we do in our small plot of land to bring back some of the nature so many of us are fond of from our childhoods, but also enrich that and make it something more than what it was back when we were growing up. We looked at a number of different schemes. How could we plant tens of thousands of trees and quickly realize actually that wasn't the right thing to do? That wouldn't actually improve biodiversity. And that's when I came across rewilding. It was sort of a natural segue in from regeneration that felt both in tune from the nature sort of goals we were aiming towards, but also how I guess I felt towards nature as a person, sort of that lack of wildness, and not only that lack of wildness, but that lack of connection we have, with most of us sort of sitting in offices and cities around the UK. It's not very often going to go out in nature, and when we do, it's often to go see very rugged landscapes of hills, of grassland, and not the sort of more biodiverse areas you would see in the likes of the Amazon or Northern America. And that's something I thought, well, why can't we replicate a bit of that here?
I would define rewilding as I think most people involved now would, in a quite straightforward way, which is to see ecological function restored to land in a way that means that the land can develop and exist in its own way and with minimal guidance from humans and minimum intervention.
Gosh, rewilding definition. Maybe it's a peculiarly British thing, but I tend to think about that maybe slightly differently. As in, if you were down the pub with your mates and they ask you about rewilding, how would you define it? I think it's really simple. I mean, I think people overcomplicate rewilding, and at its heart, it's just about putting nature back in charge, or giving nature the helping hand so that it kind of takes over. So, yeah, it's about having landscapes where nature is in control, essentially, and obviously that requires to some degree some help from humans to get to that point where natural processes can take over.
And what's really different, I think, between that idea and conservation is that idea of who's in charge. With conservation, it's, if you like, the people who say, we want to conserve X butterfly or Y animal, and we're going to, if you like, manipulate the environment to serve that particular purpose. With rewilding and ecological restoration, it's seeing what the land wants to do and see how it might develop. It might mean that the land ends up looking completely different to how you imagined it would in the first place, because you're talking about ecological processes which actually we still don't understand entirely.
Think about it in terms of giving natural evolutionary processes precedence, so that we put in place the building blocks, which for me is restoration work. So you start to take a landscape that for whatever reason has been damaged or degraded, and you start to look at that landscape and think about, well, actually what is missing? Why is this landscape not functioning? And if you can put those building blocks back, then there should be a point at which you step back from that in terms of human management and just say, actually, this is a fully functioning ecosystem now. All the trophic levels are filled. It's interacting across those various trophic levels. We don't need to manage it.
For me, it's more about learning to coexist. Learning to coexist with nature in a way that we may not necessarily have been doing, where we try to understand the processes and we try to not fight against them, but to live with them. And not just processes in terms of nature by itself, in terms of vegetation, in terms of trees and fungi, but also in terms of animals. And that also includes people. A coexistence for the continued existence of all of us. That's how I view rewilding, which may be a bit more sort of ephemeral and squishy, but there we are.
Hi, my name's Alan Watson Featherstone. I'm Scottish and I live in the Findhorn Eco-Village in the northeast of Scotland. And today we're in my house where I live with my wife, a house I designed with an architect about 20 years ago to high ecological specification, organic, lots of plants, natural, as a reflection of my values.